Thanks, Greg. This is Jason Costigan, Costo's Corner. This was Costo last week with the Warriors.
My job is to call it as I see it. And I'm sorry, but the Warriors, guess what? The Dolphins have done the Warriors no favours whatsoever. No. And I think, and I'm going to tell you now, if the Roosters don't put 40 on the Warriors, I'll be shocked.
Oh, come on, man. Now, that was just a little over the top, Costo. Not that either of us are ever over the top. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And I know you got some Irish in there. You must have.
Marty.
Yeah.
Mate, absolutely. Top of the morning to you. Well, it is an island, of course. And I am very, all jokes aside, I am very proud of my Irish ancestry. And, my great-great-grandfather actually was a policeman in Ireland, and he came out and became a pioneering policeman in Queensland, and I'm his great-great-grandson. I'm very proud of that, and I follow the Irish rugby league team very closely, and but on the other side of the family, my father's Albanian. I have Maltese sisters. I have Albanian sisters. I have a stepmother from North Macedonia. My father actually came out from Italy in 1964 after he worked in Latin America and could speak 6 languages. And and I've got 24 out of my 28 first cousins who live in Europe from Turkey through to Germany. So that's fairly multicultural, eh?
Yeah, pretty damn good. Mate, you said 40 points from the Roosters. You were a little overboard on that. But to be fair, I thought the Warriors were always second best last week, that we weren't really owning that game.
No, and I think the Warriors did well in the circumstances. I didn't expect the scoreline, and I think they probably could take a lot of positives out of that game. And we'll come to their game in a moment because it's there's no easy games in this competition, Marty. And I've said it before to you, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face to you and anyone who's willing to listen. The unpredictability of our competition is one of our competitions and one of the NRL's greatest strengths. And if you look at other competitions, and this is across other sports, but it includes the Super League in England, you never know who's going to win the premiership or lift the trophy at the end of the season in our competition. And that's what, the likes of Ken Arthurson and John Quayle said years ago when they let your team in, the Warriors, the team that I got to call for a decade, the Cowboys and whatnot. And look at the Dolphins. No one expected them to do what they're doing, and they're on the cusp of 3 straight wins as newcomers.
Costo's Corner coming shortly. Before we do that, new concussion protocols, the 11-day stand-down rule, absolutely necessary, if a little bit late, but whatever, it's better than never.
Well, again, making rules up on the hop, in politics, you call it policy on the run, don't you, Marty?
Yeah,
and I'm sure you've heard that expression once. You've heard it a million times, and so too your listeners. They're not mugs. But, at the end of the day, player welfare must be of paramount importance. And I have no doubt I will criticise Volandis and Abdo until the cows come home on many fronts, particularly in relation to expansion and their support of the game in the Pacific and more broadly internationally and other matters. But you can't doubt their sincerity and their desire to make sure we look after the players. And, let's not kid ourselves. They're terrified of these big potentially $1 billion lawsuits. That's the world we live in. So I think we've got a common sense outcome here. But you're right. It should have happened at the start of the season before we had a ball kicked in anger.
Costo's Corner coming shortly. That's where we run through every single game of the round. Good couple of minutes or 90 seconds on each. But the Eagles versus the Eels last night. We've had a few texts in saying that the Eels were robbed 0-3 now. And also every game they play, they seem to come, playing against a team that's coming off a bye. Did you think the Eagles deserved that win?
Well, the person who thinks that they were robbed, Parramatta that is, I suspect they weren't happy with the ruling on that forward pass that involved Clint Gutherson, because King Gatho had plenty to say about it during the course, or at the moment in the heat of the battle, I should say. But look, Parramatta, they scored 6 tries, but they let 6 in. Goal kicking at the end of the day proved the difference, and Mitchell Moses is normally pretty reliable, and he would be ruining those missed opportunities. Sivo gave them a glimmer of hope, but they kept chasing their tails during the game, and playing at Manly at Brookvale was never going to be easy. Look, at the end of the day, Parramatta 0-3. Let's not forget they made the grand final, Marty, last year. They're 0-3, and so. Yeah, well, who would have predicted that they'd be possibly winless in the first month of the competition? They've got a big week coming up. You'll see a lot of pressure and a lot of publicity about Parramatta this week after losing 3 straight.
Knights versus Dolphins, that's the match tonight. We're following that with the Roosters Rabbitohs, but this is the Knights side that won last week, and that was against the Tigers. Yeah, they got up, no Kalen Ponga, of course. The Dolphins go 2-2. Who you got?
Well, Newcastle have had big changes to their personnel, and as much as it was admirable, that victory last week, some were saying it was the most courageous victory in the club's history, remembering they've been in the competition since 1988. That's a big call, but
they won it
certainly
twice,
it's been going to... Well, it's going to be talked about for a long time because they weren't entitled to win that game, but they got the job done. Look, for Benny's boys, Jared Wallace will be missing for personal reasons. I can't tell you much more about that. But for the local audience where you are, this is interesting. Cody Nikorima is the new hooker for the Dolphins because Marshall King has obviously been suspended. So there's some changes for the Dolphins, but winning form is good form, and I think they can make it 3 in a row. Dolphins 1-12.
Okay, Roosters versus Rabbits. This is 9th place 6. I don't know whether the positions on the table mean that much at the moment. A Roosters side that, do you think, are better than the 20 points they put on against the Warriors?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I suspect that that was an underperformance by the Roosters. No disrespect to the Warriors, but this is going to be a massive game. It's the talk of Sydney Town. There's no doubt about that. And also the talk of Bondi Junction is this salary cap situation with the manager of Brandon Smith, what he had to say about salary cap and the salary cap story that bobbed up. And on the back of that, Peter Volandy sending a warning letter to all clubs saying, listen, you're on notice. So watch this space there. Whether that's a distraction for the Roosters coming into this game in this day and age with professional players, you wouldn't think so, but you never know. Angus Crichton, speaking of off-field situations, he's checked out of his mental health facility, and I believe he's at a much better space, and that's great. I'm sure everyone in rugby league wishes him well with the Roosters. And for the Bunnies, Thomas Burgess signed a contract extension during the week, keeping him to Redfern until the end of next year. But the big plus for the Chooks is Werera Hargraves comes back and Victor Radley come back, both from injury. That is a huge plus for the boys from Bondi. But I'm tipping South Sydney in this game. I think South Sydney's up for it. I think South Sydney will go places this year. As I said, I'm a bit of a fan of them going to the grand final this year. Totola is back for the front row. I think they've got plenty of meat up front here, and I reckon the forward battle will be gladiatorial, to say the least.
Super Saturday is what they call it. 3 big matches on: Titans Storm, Cowboys Warriors, and Broncos Dragons. Jason Costigan is with us every Friday. Costo's Corner. We run through these games. Titans, they'll be smarting after shipping 30-plus points against that Dragons side. But this is a Storm side that got equally upset by the Doggies. So I just think this is a really intriguing matchup, this one.
Well, remember how I thought the Warriors were on a hiding to nothing, going out to play up against the Roosters? I think the Gold Coast here is on a hiding to nothing because I think Melbourne Storm will be super angry. There are some question marks, Marty, in relation to players such as Kamakamitha, Xavier Coates, Sims, and Justin Olam, that rock, the block of granite from Papua New Guinea. So I'm not sure who's going to play at this stage, and I'm sure there'll be some interesting final selections there for this game on Super Saturday tomorrow night. I'll tell you what, for the Gold Coast, what we should point out to your audience is that the younger brother of Fa'asu Malawi, young Isaac, he gets his NRL debut alongside his bro in Super Saturday against Melbourne Storm. That's a beautiful thing for the family. It's a great story for rugby league, particularly in multicultural round. The Gold Coast also missing Sam Verrills. Of course, he was a marquee signing for the boys on the glitter strip. He's out with a shoulder problem. I'm not touching the Gold Coast this week. I think Melbourne 13+.
All right, Cowboys versus Warriors then. And don't tell us what you told us last week. I want to hear something that says to me that gives me hope here.
Well, I don't know when you last went for a run in the middle of the day or early evening in Townsville at this time of the year, because I got to give you the tip, Marty. It's hot, stinking hot up there. And I'm not sure on how long they've been there to acclimatise, but, with new players coming into the game, it's always a concern. Look, the absenteeism, I'm going to tell you stuff that you might not like, but Nickel Klukstar is your most potent attacking player at the Warriors, and he's not playing.
No.
So it's a huge out for the Warriors. You can't sugarcoat it. But mind you, North Queensland have got issues as well with the suspended duo of Hiku and Drinkwater. With Hiku out, Shibasaki comes in. I believe he was playing rugby in Japan. What a name, Shibasaki. Again, multicultural round. It really does underline the melting pot that we've got of cultures with players in our game. Just on the Warriors, Curran, who's just a workhorse. I'm a big fan of his. There's a question mark over his fitness in terms of a hip injury. Not certain to play, but Tavanga will come in if he is ruled out. But I can't see the Warriors troubling the Cowboys. Even though Drinkwater is such a linchpin, I think Cowboys 1-12 on home soil.
Broncos against Dragons here. Dragons are third in the table. That's a bit lofty because they've only played the one match. This is a Broncos side 2 out of 2. Come on, mate. I mean, come on. You're going home team, and I know you're going home team. Marto just told us it's 36 degrees in Brisbane at the moment.
Yeah, and I think Brisbane will be hot on the field, forgetting about the weather. I think, they're a much settled side. Notwithstanding that terrible injury to Corey Oates, he's obviously recovering from that fractured jaw. We wish him well. It was ugly for him, ugly for the game. Jesse Arthurs is the replacement, if you're wondering. He's a player that has improved vastly. I think Kevin Walters will be rubbing his hands at the prospect of putting a score on the Dragons. So St George Illawarra, look, what they did last week was what they did last week, but going to play in Brisbane at the Cauldron, it'll be hot in more ways than one.
Oh, okay. Bulldogs versus West Tigers. My doggies, not my dog. Matt Gunn. You know Gunny from way back from Radio Sport days. You remember him. A diehard Bulldogs fan who's just watched rubbish. He's watched crap. He's watched bollocks and keep going for the last 7 years, mate. But this is a team that's playing probably... I mean, I don't know whether you call them the worst in the competition, but this Tigers team is a tough watch at the moment.
Well, if you're a season ticket holder for the Warriors, or for the Tigers, you'd be very, very disappointed, wouldn't you? 2 games at Leichhardt and got nothing to show for it. Look, let's talk about the Bulldogs. Ciraldo, he'd have to be on a high, privately anyway, after that victory in Melbourne. Rookie coach, I wish him well. I think that's fantastic. It's a good news story for the Bulldogs. They've got the same 17 that will back up at Belmore in this game against the winless Tigers. Bateman has been selected by Tim Sheens, but not expected to play. I'll tell you, there's a player who I think might get some good game time here, and that's particularly after Adam Dewey didn't train on Wednesday because of a calf complaint, and that's the Fijian World Cup halfback, Brendan Wakeham. He's been playing good football, Marty, in the lower grades for the West Magpies in the New South Wales Cup. Don't be surprised if we see more from the Barty number 7 for Tim Sheens' side as they look for their first win of the season. I can't see it happening. I think at Belmore, Canterbury will be brimming with confidence after that success against the Storm. Totally agree. And I think Canterbury 1-12 is a safe bet.
Raiders Sharks. Now, I thought Cronulla were brilliant against the Eels last week. I mean, this is a team that soaked it up and soaked it up and soaked it up. And just, it was like watching a game of round ball football, Costo, where, they didn't have the ball for 80% of the game. And when they got it, they just struck like lightning and they scored. The Raiders can't, I don't know. I mean, I always think this team should be better than they are. I'm predicting the upset. I'm predicting the home team here. I don't know why I'm doing that.
Well, I'm tipping the Canberra Raiders. It's their first game at home this year. And the other thing is with Cronulla, I don't know how long they can sustain this for. I've still got reservations as to their premiership credentials with no Nico Hines. Now, he's again going to be a spectator. He's either going to be sitting down there in the Capitol on the sideline or watching this game on Fox League. He's out because of this niggling calf problem. And I'm not sure when he's coming back. I don't know, if Coach Fitzgibbon knows when he's coming back. Perhaps there's a week-to-week proposition, and perhaps if I was interviewing the coach on game day, I'd put it to him. Is it a week-to-week proposition? I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. He is, after all, the reigning Dally M medalist, the best player in our competition. I think Canberra, notwithstanding their underachievement in the opening fortnight of the competition, I think the Raiders back at home will get the job done. Canberra 1-12 in the capital to complete round 3, the multicultural round.
And this particular week, we're doing something different to finish this particular slot. Jason Costigan joins us every Friday. We love you to bits and we thank you so much for always giving us your time. You have the floor for a couple of minutes here, pal. Do it.
Well, mate, I can tell you a little bit about last night. Castleford got their first win in the English Super League, and you think, big deal. But they actually had a Nigerian-born player by the name of Muaz Mustafa involved. So Castleford 14-8 over the son of Brian Smith, Rowan Smith, and his Leeds Rhinos. That's a big win for Castleford. And I just say that given the multicultural flavour to this weekend's NRL round. But can I just go a step further? Many people, and I think we've touched on it, Marty, they actually do play rugby league in war-torn Ukraine. I've touched on it previously, and I just want to give Nathan Cleary, whose Penrith Panthers have got the bye this week, a big rap because he's come out, he's proud of his Ukrainian heritage. I think it's his grandmother who was born in a Nazi concentration camp in Ukraine during the dark days of World War II.
Crazy.
He's
Wow.
he's calling for people to get behind Ukraine to try and help rebuild the game there. I've been involved myself, as I've said before. I've called their grand final. I've called their national team playing both Serbia and Russia. There are a handful of players, including Cleary, who's eligible to play for Ukraine. Watch this space. They're involved in the Euro qualifiers, if you like, later this year. They can't play on home soil for obvious reasons. But, I think it's a great story. Their club competition's model on Super League. That's why the team in the capital is called the Kyiv Rhinos. You've got the Lviv Tigers, for example, based on Castleford. It's a good story. It's a good news story, and I commend Cleary by showing some leadership here in getting the rugby league community to try and rally behind Ukraine. You can find the Ukrainian Rugby League on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I encourage your listeners to get on board.
All right, you got 30 more seconds, mate, to tell me why the Warriors are winning this game.
Well, I don't need 30 more seconds. Your producer's going to catch flies with his mouth open. Look, I think they're a chance because Drinkwater, I said before, is such a linchpin, but they're a long way from home. And, if Curran plays and they get a lucky break, but I tell you what, it's a fortress, Townsville. It's not an easy place to win. I just don't think it'll be their week up there.
Jason, thanks so much, mate. We'll talk again next week.